Welcome to Sessions Cafe. I'm your host, Keri Singleton. Today, part 2 of our interview with Andino Ward. So, Andino, talk to me about May 13th, 1985. Where were you in terms of your life, and were you living in Philadelphia?
Wasn't living in Philadelphia. I was living in Hatfield, Pennsylvania at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Married, married to my second wife.
Okay.
And 2 daughters.
Okay.
And life was great. I mean, I owned a business. I was a financial broker and so on,
Okay.
so I had a very nice clientele.
So reluctantly, you moved on from the search.
Had to, because the end result basically was, at that point, your wife is telling you that, they'll kill him rather than give him to you.
Right.
And the city's playing games. They want to basically make you a commando on their behalf, basically, and then, obviously drop you and flush you down the toilet.
Right.
I'm like, I'm done.
So
there's nowhere, I have to move on. And my thought process was, at some point, my son will grow up and he will have the ability to think for himself and come look for me.
Right.
And hopefully he's alive.
Right.
And, that was the prayer that we had, that, it would happen, but we went on with life, or I did. And then, May the 13th comes. And obviously I had been watching the lead up to this.
Right.
Because I knew that this is the way it was going to end. I knew this way back when
In the
I
70s.
was, when I was trying to deal with, getting my son, and I knew this is where it was headed.
Right.
So, here we are, we're watching the news, because it's all over the news, like 24/7.
Right.
And finally, basically, out of the clear blue, a bomb gets dropped.
Right.
A fire ensues. And obviously, 3 neighborhoods are burned down.
Right.
And 11 people are dead. And we see this boy being brought out, because that was all over the news.
Right.
But again, I did not recognize him as my son. It's been so many years. I didn't know.
Repeatedly, the media was suggesting that the young boy that escaped was 9 years old.
Right, when he was actually 13.
13, right.
But because of basically the lifestyle he had, you could see that his growth had been stunted.
Okay.
He did not look like a 13-year-old.
So you had no reason to believe that was your son.
Exactly.
On top of the fact that you hadn't seen him in
eons.
Yeah.
You're talking about 10 or more years.
Yeah.
And what have you. So yeah, I mean, I had no inclination that he was Mike. And then basically, a phone call comes, and it's my father. And my father was a buyer for Brooks Brothers, and he was into fine, men's haberdashery.
The suits, yep.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And he had a very, very, incredible clientele. Some of the biggest doctors in the city, lawyers, police officials.
Correct.
You name it, basically. I mean, he had them as clients.
Mm-hmm.
And, apparently one of his clients was a top, basically, member of the police force.
Okay.
And I do mean top. We're not talking, He basically comes in, makes a special trip to Brooks Brothers in Willow Grove, and, says to my father, listen, I need to talk with you, Rich. Pulls him to the side and he says, you need to get in touch with your son, because that boy that you're seeing on TV, the only child survivor, that is your grandson, and obviously your son's son. Wow. Now, how this cop knew this, I don't know, because I never got the story on that. And my father may have known, but because obviously this was a high-ranking official,
right?
He was sworn to silence and could not talk about it.
Right.
I don't even know who the official was.
Right.
I'll never know. All of that was kept very quiet.
Wow.
And so obviously my father, calls me and he says, have you been watching what's happening on TV? And I'm like, yeah,
of course
we all have.
Who hasn't? Right?
And but I guess he was asking from the standpoint that, he was at Brooks Brothers, so he hadn't been seen. Gotcha. So he didn't know, what had taken place with this child, other than his, basically client coming in and telling him.
Yeah.
And so he says, are you sitting down? And I'm like, yeah, and I'm trying to figure out what is wrong with him.
Where is he going with this?
Yeah. And then he says, listen, and he tells me about the police official that came in, doesn't say his name or any of that.
Right.
And says, that boy you're seeing is your son.
Wow.
And you need to get down to Children's Hospital right away.
So you get to Children's Hospital.
Right.
And how does that even...
Well, first of all, basically, man, they had him handcuffed to the bed. And I'm like, you kidding? Secondly, the police have been in and out and no one's stopping them from questioning him. So immediately,
13-year-old
13-year-old, so immediately the first thing I did was had him basically unshackled. Second thing I did was basically contacted my attorney and told him, like, carte blanche, no one basically talks to him now or ever again without basically legal representation.
Right.
So all of that was squashed. I then basically looked at Mike, and I said, hi. And, I said to him, do you know who I am? And he says, yeah, you're my father. Now, you have to understand, that was even more shocking because I'm looking at him trying to figure out, it threw me off. I didn't know how to respond at first because I'm trying to figure out, how does that happen? And so I said, how do you know I'm your father? And this was after about like maybe 2 or 3 seconds of just silence because I didn't know what to think.
Right.
And he said, my mother told me about you and told me basically who you were. Now, all of this time, you have to understand, because of the interactions I've had with Move, because of the interaction I had with her,
right.
I did not think in any remote possibility there was the aspect of any discussions with him about me.
Right.
It just didn't seem like it would be something
that
would have occurred.
But how would he even recognize you?
Well, that's the other part that basically I was shocked about because I'm like, how does this happen? But I kind of like, at that point, thinking, listen, this kid has really been through a lot.
Yeah.
This is not the time nor the place to try and, ferret all of those things out.
Correct.
I need to really establish an understanding with him and what have you. So I kind of like left it there and just moved forward with, dealing with the doctors about his care because he was burned 30% on 30% of his body, and so on, and trying to really get to know him. So I spent a lot of time at the hospital. They even set up a bed for me, for the entire 3 weeks that he was there so that I could, get to know him, get to understand him, get to, obviously relate to him understanding me and learning basically what kind of care I was going to have to initiate once we brought him home.
Right.
And believe me, that care was nothing like, like I could have ever imagined. Never. I mean, we're talking basically when I brought him home, we're talking the fact that, 4 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, I had to basically put him in a tub filled with water, unbandage his, burns. And I mean, they were horrible looking. This is 30% of his body.
Yeah.
And I had to scrub those burns to debride them, it's called, and to take off basically the Silvadine that had been on there and anything else that may have been accumulating that would have an effect on those wounds.
Sounds very painful.
Oh, it was seriously painful. I mean, painful for him in the physical sense and mentally, and painful for me completely in the mental sense.
Yeah.
Because, you're talking, in those 2 hours, I would always have to take a break. So I would just take a break, let him basically relax and just rest in the tub. And a lot of times, Keri, I would just walk into the hallway and I would cry. And I would cry. Because, at that point, it was kind of like you start to look at a situation and you're saying, if only I had done things differently, would basically, obviously this child, be suffering the way he is.
So as challenging as I'm assuming it was, I can't imagine, not only the medical transitions, the emotional transitions. What was it like trying to? I'm assuming there was a lot of emotional issues that he dealt with from spending over 10 years of his life,
right,
in various move houses, and you exposing him literally to a whole new world. It must have been very challenging for both of you.
Well, yeah, it was challenging, but let's just say, the challenge for him was different than the challenge for me.
Right.
Because, the challenge for me was to be able to bring him back from the brink of the insanity of Move into a supposed normal world.
Right.
As a black man, you understand,
right.
You know what I'm saying, from the context of being black in this world. Nothing is really normal.
And normalcy is definitely a different...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, so I had to analyze him and I had to really understand him. you know, versus, say, trying to make these immediate fast moves.
Right.
You know, so that's why things like Sesame Street, The Electric Factory, The Three Stooges, you know, and other things, you know, really became relevant.
Right.
There was a point when finally, you know, obviously everyone's calling him Birdie, and I said, you know, that's not your name. I told him what his actual name was, but I said, I think it's time we change your name completely.
So when he came home from the hospital, and, you know, he was now with a new family.
Yeah.
Who was calling him Birdie?
Well, no. That's what he would see in the news.
Got you.
You know what I'm saying? We weren't calling him Birdie, but the news was still referring to him as Birdie. So, you know, I thought it was time at that point to do something about his name, you know, because Birdie had no significance to me. That was a move thing.
What were you calling him when he came home from the hospital?
We were just calling him basically son.
Okay.
For a moment, you know, because obviously I wanted to get away from the Birdie situation.
Right.
Like, you know, when we first brought him home, it took about basically a week to even cut his nails because they didn't believe in cutting nails. And I mean, his nails were just very long.
Wow.
And he didn't want to because basically, you know, they had this whole philosophy that, you know, doing things like that in some way robbed the essence or the spirit of whom you are and all of that kind of nonsense.
He didn't want the dreadlocks cut either.
Well, that was the first thing we cut, and that was in the hospital. He consented to that.
Okay.
He and I had a long talk, and I cut the dreads basically in the hospital. But the fingernails was not something that happened for 3 weeks until we brought him home, sat him down, trimmed his nails, showed him how basically nice they would look, how more comfortable it is, you know, obviously, because you don't have these long nails that are messing up things, you know, and you look kind of, you know, like everybody else with your nails. So that was one. Then, you know, it came to the name, and I decided, you know, instead of basically me giving him a name, being that basically, you know, we come from a very religious background, and obviously that's, you know, was part of our life, I gave him the Bible, and I told him basically, you know, to pick a name from it. And the first name he comes across was Michael the Archangel. Okay. And he chose Michael. The second thing he came across was Moses, the baby who was put basically in the, you know, little raft and put into the ocean and found. So it was kind of like almost a spiritual thing to a degree, because here he is picking two names, one basically of, you know, a warrior, an angel, you know, and the second basically of a child who obviously is cast out to save his life, but basically, you know, grows up to be a great, you know, warrior for God and freeing basically the Egyptian or the Jews from Egypt.
And did he recognize the significance?
He recognized it as I explained the names to him.
Oh, but initially he just picked the names.
Initially he just liked Michael the Archangel, and he liked Moses. Okay. Now I did not interfere. I let him just look in the book and find these himself.
Wow.
But the significance of the names was something that got me, which is what prompted me to then explain to him who these people are in these names that he picked. And, you know, it was very profound for him, because even he had a reaction of, wow, you know, kind of in his own way, you know, to these names. So his name became Michael Moses Ward, and we had everything changed to reflect that.
Wow.
The time then came basically between, you know, cleaning the burns and obviously taking him to the hospital for that. You know, a psychological evaluation needed to be done. And the city, since it was paying for it, suggested, you know, a psychologist at, that was University of Penn. Okay. And so I take him down to, you know, this place, and I meet the psychologist who's going to be, you know, examining him. And, you know, I'm kind of leery because, again, being black, you know how these things can go. And, you know, I'm thinking like, all right, but I'm going to give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And, you know, she's in with him for about 30 minutes. She then comes.
Alone?
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously they have to evaluate him without, you know, the parent.
Interference, okay.
Yeah, and also, you know, they want his full attention. Not him looking at you to, you know, obviously identify whether he should or shouldn't.
Correct.
But then she comes out after 30 minutes, because it's a drawing thing and all these other, I guess, blotters they have them look at. And she shows me this picture. And this picture is of an object. And, I don't know what the object is. Mm-hmm. But she says to me, I got the distinct impression that this is a phallic symbol. Mm-hmm. And I looked at her and I looked at it and I looked back at her and I just said, I don't think this is going to work. And we left.
Right.
And so the city calls me and they're like, what happened? And so I kind of reiterated to them what, some of the things were that she said. And I was very, very clear with them. I'm like, look, you need to understand something. This child is black. I'm black. Mm-hmm. There is a history that exists of you folks creating very, very, very erroneous situations with black existence. Yeah. And that idiot was another one. Not having it. So I decided at that point that whatever was going to happen, it was going to have to be me that did it.
Right.
And what have you. I could not trust anyone because I wasn't going to have that basically taking hold in an already disturbed child.
Of course.
So I sold my business, basically, like I said, I was a financial consultant. I sold my business and I stayed home basically for a period of 2 years.
Wow.
And I educated him in everything. I mean, from the aspect of ABCs, things going on in the world, money, how to, count, taking him to the store so that he could see how the transactions work, how life basically existed in, again, what we would call a normal world.
Right.
I now need some assistance here because he needs to understand, obviously what it is to be a kid like himself. So there were kids in the neighborhood that I was familiar with that I knew. One in particular was a really nice cat, and so I connected him with Mike. And next thing I know, Mike is basically riding his bike with these guys. Mm. He's going to the basketball court. He's all over the place. They come back to the house basically, they've got girls with them and the girls are giggling because they like Mike and Mike's giggling, because obviously, and these were the folks that then took him the rest of the way that I couldn't in terms of what it was to be a kid. Mm. Skateboarding, they took him to 7-Eleven to get Slurpees, taught him how to take, the money that I taught him, to count,
right,
and how to spend it and what have you, so he comes back with Slurpees and, now and laters and all this other stuff, and I mean, these kids were his world. And it was a beautiful thing to see a kid who came from all that, he had come from,
right,
and gone through all of that and all of the things that obviously we had just gone through up to that point, make this complete conversion where, he's obviously riding BMX and he's, obviously wanting to skateboard,
right,
and, these guys and girls are like his work, and that finally broke the entire cycle of move in the context of basically what he knew his life was then versus what his life was now and the potential of what it could be moving forward. And 6 months later, he was basically attending school. The school worked with me very well in terms of setting up the program for him, so that obviously he was starting at a very huge deficit, but they would be able to bring him to the point that he needed to be brought to. And they did. They were very good about it, and obviously I was very involved keeping an eye on them because I didn't want them, screwing around in ways they shouldn't. And I mean, next he's in junior high, he's playing football, he's got a host of friends, always at the house or, he's at their houses. And then into high school, he's still playing football, graduates, and life is good, But at the same time, I could still see that he was a very withdrawn young man, because obviously, again, he did not trust a lot of the world. He didn't even, at times it would appear, that I saw he didn't even trust me. And it's not because he didn't trust me, but it was because he was still fighting the internal battle between what he had been told the world and people were,
of course,
and what basically, I'm showing him what the world is and what people are.
Very conflicting
so
situation.
Yeah, the conflict was still within him and was always going to be. And, he was very introverted. He was never an extrovert and always very, very cautious and what have you. And I felt very bad because these were the psychological effects that obviously, you know, I knew would remain with him long after basically, you know, and into his adulthood, and would shape, you know, or really deter him from really accomplishing a lot that he should, you know. And the thing that I'll end this part of it on is the fact that the thing that hurt me the most was the fact that, you know, with my other children, I had time with them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You have time, you know, to nurture them from, you know, birth all the way up to that point. You know, I didn't have that time with him.
Right.
I had none of that time. So my time with him was cut short because, you know, by the time basically he's 13 already, and by the time, let's say, he hits 14 or 15, as is always the case, and you know this for you and I, we listen more to basically and are more involved with our friends in the street, you know.
Right, exactly.
So there's a period of time that you miss, and that I missed with him. Not basically, you know, being able to like take him to baseball games or, you know, to play baseball with him or all of those things, you know, that they were lost.
Right.
You know, and I mean, it hurt me so bad because here we are now, he's running into manhood and he's, you know, about to get married and all these other things that I did not want because I didn't think he had enough time, you know, to really assimilate the emotional aspects of these things and to learn, you know, like my father taught me, you know, what it was to be married, you know, because I could see my mother and him and, you know, so on and so forth, you know, but he spent time developing, you know, my thought process towards manhood and being a man, responsible. And I was able to do some of that with Mike, but it was just so much I wasn't. Like kids, I never thought he was ready because there were too many things he was still psychologically grappling with that had to be dealt with. A woman, you know, they knew he had money because, I mean, I got him millions basically in the lawsuit, you know, from the city, which is another reason basically I never spend time in the city because they hate that and what have you, you know, and trying to make sure that basically, you know, he would never be one who would be used or, you know, misused. So I set everything up where no one could touch it, not even me, only he could, you know, and the attorney and what have you. But going through all those things, I just realized, you know, at the end of his life when we were burying him, I just never got the time that, you know, a parent wants with their child.
Of course. And
a parent needs with their child. Right. And that a child needs with the parent. There were many things that I just could not prepare him for because it's like time ran out, you know, because he became a man and started to, you know, move, you know, obviously as a young man into the world, you know, on his own terms. And there were things that I just couldn't teach him. It was just too late, you know, so that hurt me to my heart, you know, on the day that I buried him. That was my biggest regret, that I did not have the time like I had with my other children, that I did not have the time, you know. But at the same time, I could rejoice in the fact that I gave him some life. Right. I gave him something different than he had lived and moved.
Well, thank you, man. That means a lot coming to you, and I really appreciate you talking to me. Your story is definitely... I'm not usually speechless, but I am. I mean, it's definitely one that needs to be told and that needs to be heard. So thank you for sharing your story with my audience. And this is Keri D. Singleton of Sessions Cafe, and stay tuned. We'll have more. I want to thank Mr. Andino Ward for talking to me and providing a lot of enlightenment. I'm here in the back alley of 6200 block of Osage Avenue, where the two survivors of that Holocaust, Ramona Africa and Mike Ward, who was then known as Birdie Africa, made their escape from the burning inferno. It was here that the Philadelphia Police Department allegedly fired upon the movement members, preventing them from escaping, which resulted, of course, in the deaths of 11 of those move members. As I walk down this alley, I can almost feel the energy that took place here over 35 years ago. The water, the tear gas, the smoke, the guns, the screams, the cries, and ultimately the sound of the bomb dropping. 62 homes and 11 people died here over 35 years ago. I don't think that's something that we should ever forget. Thank you for watching. Sessions Cafe TV show is one of the projects that I work on along with the radio show and with the magazine, Intrigue magazine. So to be receiving this award means a lot to me. I just wanted to give a little background story on the episode that's being given the award. It's called A Father's Love, a conversation with Andino Ward. So Andino Ward lives in Philadelphia. He's the father of the one child survivor of the 1985 MOVE bombing. Most of us in the audience, though you don't look it, are old enough to remember when the city of Philadelphia dropped a bomb on Philadelphia row house, killing 11 people and destroying 62 homes. There were 2 survivors. Ramona Africa was one, and Michael Ward was the other. Andino Ward was Michael Ward's father, and he exclusively gave us an interview that basically did not care to discuss it with anybody else. So it was an exclusive interview, and it was our first episode, and we had the pleasure of talking to him. And it was very, very emotional. And so I want to thank not just the Sitter Awards, but the Bragg family. I, of course, want to thank the Sessions Cafe TV show team, Paula Dorsa, my partner here, KeVaughn Merrill, who I brought him on stage for a reason, you guys. The assistant producer of the Sessions Cafe TV show, the guy who did all the editing and a lot of the work, is actually visually impaired. Which is why he wears the shades. I'm trying to be cute. He wears them for a reason. He's a shining example of the fact that you can do any damn thing you put your mind to. I want to thank our network, Pipe TV. Please put us together for Pipe TV. They keep us on the air. Dionn McGill is the show's creative creator. And of course, Andino Ward, who lost his son, the gentleman who escaped the fire, actually died at age 46. He drowned in a swimming pool on a cruise ship. So he has a hell of a story, and that's what our show is about. Extraordinary people telling ordinary people's extraordinary stories. And I really want to thank you guys for supporting the Sessions Cafe TV show. And please, y'all look damn good. Give yourselves a round of applause.